I think for me, as a child, I was not much of a reader. I was a very slow reader and I had trouble reading. So for me, it's actually just diversifying my reading at the moment. It's like so it's not necessarily being inspired by particular authors, but just exploring different styles of writing, and different genres and that sort of thing. For me, someone like Elizabeth Gilbert, her work has been really inspirational, and particularly her book Big Magic is really something I'd recommend for anyone working in creativity, because that book sort of helps decipher, the difference between I'm doing this for fun and for joy and for lightness, am I doing this for publication, and the power of creativity and the process of creativity. So I found that a really useful book and a good reminder to come back to as well, to enjoy the process.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the podcast. Glad to have everybody back with us here on Living the Next Chapter. And my guest today is joining me far from Canada. And I'm happy to meet amazing authors from around the world. And when you hear our author's delightful voice, you're going to go, yep, that author's not from Canada. And I love that. Tansy's with us today. Tansy, welcome to Living the Next Chapter. So glad to have you here. See, I told you, everyone listening. Does that sound great?
Yeah,
Tansy,
so I'm actually in New Zealand, living in
Christchurch,
but I'm from Australia, so you'll hear a bit of the Australian accent come through as well. Yeah.
A little bit of both, right? I love it. So yeah, I love podcasting because I get to meet great people from around the world. So exciting to grow our community and grow our connections through podcasting. This is really fun for me as a host to get to have time with you. I want to jump in right away. Let's talk right off the bat. How did this all start for you as an author? Take us back to the period of time when you weren't an official author and now you are. What was it? What was that thing that kind of told you that this was something you wanted to pursue to become an author?
I think I've always wanted to be an author. So even when I was a child, like I was one of those kids who would research things, and it was the days when we had typewriters. So I'd pull out the typewriter and do a little typewriter written book, and try to copy and line draw pictures and things like that. So I think it was always there, something that I'd love to do. And then over the years with research and work, like I always find myself drawn to writing and expressing myself through writing. And there's definitely been periods of time where I was interested in writing a book, but didn't really know where to start or whether I could do it. So it was probably about 10 years ago when I actually decided, yes, I'm going to make the commitment and bring, not only like focusing on writing a book, but just bring writing into, more of a daily practice, because, sometimes it's a dream that we have, but we don't actually do it. We're not actually writing anything. So I started with blogging, and as a way to sort of build my writing skills, but also to, I suppose, give myself that idea that, yes, I could write a book, this could turn into something bigger. So just starting with something small, I think, was where I started. And I suppose the first book I wrote, I was thinking more about helping people, but I think with time it's become more of expressing myself and having fun and playing with different genres and that sort of thing.
Good. So what kind of authors inspire you as an author and as a reader? Who are you drawn to?
I would say I like self-help, but I do like fictional works that have a philosophy or self-help feel. So things like Celia Hearn, she's an Irish writer who writes novels that have I suppose fun, magical parts to them, but also a bit of philosophy. Jodi Picoult is another one. So I think those sorts of books that have a bit of psychology in them or bring in a bit of philosophy, I suppose.
And so that kind of you pull that in as an author yourself, because you want to help people through what you're writing, and you're kind of offering some assistance, some learning, some teaching while you're writing.
Definitely.
You're kind of emulating that
That's
yourself.
what I suppose. I think there's not, personally, I feel like there's not enough of those books in the world, like where it's an entertaining read, like I'm just trying to think of like Paulo Coelho is another one who's written quite a number of books that are fictional, but they have like life lessons in them. And I think, it's a really accessible way to impart that sort of knowledge, but also for people to reflect and take what they want from reading. So the first book I wrote was self-help, but I feel like self-help can sometimes, one, you have to decide, do I need help in this area? Do I want to read something that's potentially a little bit more dry? Like self-help is more of a dry thing. It's not necessarily bedtime, beachside reading. And I think also with fiction, we can pull out what we want from a book. And that's what's really lovely about books that say maybe have different perspectives, because we can sort of see maybe where we fit in that or see things from someone else's point of view. So I really like that sort of style of writing.
So if you could write a book and there's no way you can fail, it's going to be a success. It's going to be a great success. And it would be a joy to write, a fun book that you would be smiling while you're writing. And again, you're not going to fail. It's going to be a big success. What would be a book that'd be super fun for you to write? That's just like super easy to you. You could just whip through that, compared to a book that would be so difficult for you to write that you'd be like dreading the idea of writing. What's a book that you could write easily, and what's a book that would take you a lot of time?
I think actually it comes a little bit from intention as to what I find hard. Like I think what I've found really interesting about writing fiction is that I can just allow things to come through me without that sort of expectation or planning. So I think, whether you're writing nonfiction or fiction, there is it's probably two schools of camp of like whether your structure, you structure that and you have an outline, or whether you just sort of flow with it. And I think for me, it's almost like exploring different ideas and allowing that to come through me. I think probably what would be fun, and what I try to do with my writing, but I'd like to explore more, is just getting into different mindsets of different people, like so something sort of fun, like I've had ideas of, a vegan blogger that's a murderer or something like that, that's like just a bit out there, but, like it doesn't really make sense. And so it's like the mindset behind that. So something that would be fun. I do like to bring food into what I write. I do like to bring in, I suppose, self-awareness and that sort of thing as well. But I think just almost like seeing what comes through me is what I enjoy and what I'd like to just do more of.
I like that. Okay, so tell us about what you're writing. How many books do you have? Where are you at? You're in your author journey.
So at the moment, I've got 4 books published, and I've got a children's book being illustrated at the moment, and a few other books that's sort of in the pipeline or, partially worked on. So my first book, Joyful Eating, is a nonfiction self-help book. And then when I wrote that, I thought it'd be fun to write that as a fictional story. So it's like the sort of concept we're talking about of putting yourself in the shoes of someone going through that journey, and potentially being able to say things that I wouldn't necessarily be able to say in self-help. Or like one of the things that people used to say to me when I first published the book was, it feels like you're in my mind, that you know how I think. And so I think for me to explore more of that, of like, how does someone think who is dissatisfied with their body, or is, jumping on diet after diet after diet, or holding back doing things in their life because they think that they're not worthy, or that they need to change something about themselves before they can live out, dreams, whether we're talking career or relationships. So I think being able to explore that. So fiction enabled me to do that. So I turned that sort of into a fictional book where we sort of followed a woman's journey to self-acceptance and letting go of diets and her weight holding her back in life. And I had no idea whether I'd be able to write fiction. I just thought I'd just play with this idea. And in the meantime, I started to play with some ideas around writing children's books. And I ended up with a hybrid publisher for a children's book. So I submitted that to a few publishers. And that sort of prompted me to finish the novels that I had and to finish some other children's books as well. So I think a little bit of that external validation in my writing to keep going. So I had the self-help book and then ended up publishing the children's book next, then the novel. And then after writing the novel, with people, the feedback from that, people wanted to hear more of the journey. And I think I realised writing a novel, it was almost like self-healing because there's so much you can express of yourself that you mightn't be able to express in the real world. Like as a very introverted person who's quite a deep thinker, and, you know, sometimes there's situations where after the event you think, oh, I wish I could say this, or wish I'd said that, or next time I'd do this. So being able to bring that into a story and say some of the things that you'd like to say in real life, but you may not have the confidence to, or it mightn't come to you in the moment. So when I wrote that book, I had a few people sort of say they'd like to hear more of the story, but also to weave in more of my own story. So I have been a chronic dieter in the past, and so, you know, I resonate with that. And I think for me, part of writing the book was putting myself into the mindset of being in a larger body and how I'd feel navigating a world that has so much weight bias. So that was sort of part of that book, was for me to come to a place where I didn't fear weight like I did in the past. But then my husband and I have also struggled with infertility and were unable to have children. So that was something that I decided to explore further in the second novel. And so I've woven in our story into the sort of fictional story, which has enabled me to express the emotions of what we went through, but, you know, bring in some fictional stuff that's fun and light, that sort of thing as well. I think what's interesting about my first novel is when I think about it, it's a novel, it's fictional, but so many of the stories in it are actually true. Like they're stories that people have shared with me and situations that people have been in. So I suppose it's a weaving of fiction and truth is what I really like to do and what I've done with the novels.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you got that feedback that people felt like you were in their mind, like in their brain. Like, was that your intention, or was that just was that a joy to hear that from them, that it just happened? Was that your intent to be
that was
in
definitely my
brain
intent when I was writing the novels. I think it's something I naturally do, that I can sort of almost see how people are thinking and what's, I suppose I'm a very empathetic person. So in the non-fiction, it was, you know, lots of examples of what situations people might be in or things that they might be thinking. And I spent a lot of time sort of thinking about all of the different beliefs someone might have around particular issues. So I think the fictional books enabled me to like dive into that a little bit deeply, and it was definitely very intentional to sort of get into the mindsets. There's a lot of internal dialogue in my novels as well. So you have the situation that's occurring, but also her thoughts around that situation. And I suppose it also shows how sometimes what we say is not what we're thinking as well. So it brings in a little bit of that.
I love it. Okay. And then while you're writing, we talked earlier about your publishing journey, and we have authors that are listening, and they're early. Some of them are early in their journey as an author. They don't understand the publishing side of what happens when the book is done, and even like when to start searching out for publishing and all of that. They have no idea, but they're here, and you're here, and you have some thoughts around like self-publishing and the different methods of publishing. What's been working for you? And maybe do you have any words of wisdom for a new author around what they should consider early in the beginning writing of their books around publishing?
Well, there's a lot of options. And I think the most important thing probably is to focus on your personality and who you are, because there's so much advice, should you self-publish? Should you traditionally publish? Should you so there is all these different options. And I think, I've self-published through a publishing company. I've also hybrid published, which is, you've got some benefits of traditional as well as some benefits of self-publishing. And then I have self-published, doing it all myself from scratch. And I think the choice is very much about your personality, like how much do you want to be involved in the publication process? So things like cover design or having a say on how it's marketed or where it's marketed, that sort of thing. And there is benefits to traditional publishing in terms of potentially the marketing or distribution and those sorts of things. So I think a lot of it, there's a lot of advice, but I think it comes down to your personality. Are you someone who just wants to be a writer? You just want to write and hand your work over to someone else and have them do everything for you? Having said that, nowadays we do need to market a lot more than we have in the past. Or do you want to be involved? Do you like collaborating? Like I really enjoy collaborating with illustrators and designers and having some input into the interior design and that sort of thing. So I think it's sort of knowing your personality a little bit. And I think with the process nowadays, whether you're self-publishing or traditional publishing, pretty much for everyone, unless you're a well-known author, it's writing a full manuscript that's edited to the best of your ability before you start searching for a publisher or looking for editors, whether you're self-publishing or traditional publishing. I think if you're not a known author, it's, writing it to the best of your ability first. If you're a known author, you can potentially, submit a proposal and tell someone, this is what I'm thinking of writing and find an agent and that sort of thing. But I think for most of beginning authors, it's working on the manuscript and getting that to that level. And then, once you've got a manuscript, it's then figuring out, what do I want to do? Like, is it just a one-off book, in which case maybe you don't want to learn the ins and outs of publishing? Are you looking at writing multiple books? Are you wanting this to be a career? Sort of looking at some of those sorts of things in deciding what publishing route you want to go in. Like, for example, if you want to keep a full-time job and you want to write on the side, then maybe having a traditional publisher that you can, send off your manuscript and forget about it. Or do you want to sort of know the ins and outs of publishing and advertising on Amazon? I haven't even done that sort of stuff. But, it's just a lot of things you can do if you're wanting it to be a career, websites and email lists and all these other things that come with businesses as well.
Yeah, that's exciting. Okay, so take us back into book one as we talk about joyful eating. Tell me a little bit more about who the audience is for this book and kind of what your hopes were for that audience member. Are you looking to inspire people to live healthy life in their food choices and how they present themselves in the world? Are you talking like our mentality and how we think about ourselves? Talk a little bit more about what's in book one.
So joyful eating was written very much for people that have been chronic dieters or have, tried diet after diet and fails, or, the weight just keeps creeping on, with each diet they attempt. And so I would say it's more about mindset, and it's more about the beliefs that we've had around weight and food that potentially sabotage us and cause weight, diets to fail, weight to spiral up and up. And so it's very much for those people that have had enough of dieting and want a different approach. And so I really explore things like the impact of stress and how that has, we make out that diet is just about what you eat, or, trying to find this perfect diet and this perfect way of eating when that can just impose another stress on our body, physically and emotionally, and sabotage our efforts. And is there a perfect way to eat anyway? So are we aspiring for something that's impossible? Is weight loss possible, and is that necessary for health? And so just breaking down a lot of the beliefs that we have around weight and food, and helping people to come to food in a much more peaceful and joyful way. I suppose trusting their bodies, listening to their hunger and fullness cues, mindful eating. And so just, I suppose a lot of it's really about shifting the mindset to being more relaxed around food, rather than like sort of searching for the next diet that's going to work, the next perfect way to eat, the next optimal health, lifestyle protocol online, these sorts of things that we can just keep jumping from diet to diet to diet, rather than, honouring our own bodies, and accepting where our bodies are at as well. I think we've been led to believe that our body is something we control and contain, rather than it being something we can observe and nurture and nourish. But then, a lot of what our body does with all what we nourish it with is out of our control. So it's a lot of that sort of shifting a mindset, I suppose.
Good. I like that. Great. So take us again through some of the other books as well. I'm really curious about the children's book. Can we jump over to that? Can you tell us a little bit about what that's about, and what was the idea behind writing the children's book?
I blog as well as write books, and I suppose after I wrote Joyful Eating, I was thinking about all these different diets that we have, and different how we have, this diet says this food's bad and another diet says it's good, and like you could pretty much just put all foods against each other. And I started to write like a blog about different foods that are considered good or bad by different diets, and pretty much came up with a list, and there was nothing at the end of it, maybe olive oil and lettuce, and everything else you could say, even spinach, you could say it's bad on one diet and good on another, or, meat or grains or anything, And so I'd written this blog, and I was, and I hadn't published it. It was just a hard copy thing that I had, and I had it on my floor while I was doing yoga, and I was thinking, wouldn't it be funny if like the foods were fighting each other, like, fat saying, oh, I'm better than you, to fruits, and then fruits saying, oh, no, I'm better than you, to vegetables. And, like they're sort of fighting each other for the position of superhero on the plate. So that's when the idea for that book came to me. And so it is all the foods are trying to prove that they're the superhero on the plate, and that they deserve to sort of have that, be the champion food. And I suppose that it ends with the moral of the story that all the foods belong, and it's all about, being together and all these foods working together. But I think with the children's book, and it's probably a big lesson that I learned with writing as well with the children's book, is that, I've had lots of those sorts of ideas before, but it is very much just sitting yourself down and actually writing the idea. Like, I think often we can have a line for a song or a poem or a book, and it might sit in our mind, for years, and we don't really do anything with it. But what's really needed for it to turn into something is to sit down and actually play with that, and, enable it to grow into the full work, of a book or a poem or whatever it is. And so with that book, I decided to spend the whole weekend just writing away and playing with food puns and adding lines to what, the original lines that I'd got. And so I just sort of started to build on that. And within the weekend, I had, a first draft that I could then work with, and then I could then sort of edit and add in different food puns. And it's been through many edits. I think it's probably been edited like 50 times, but it's almost like having something that you can then work with and massage and develop as well.
Yeah. It's the ultimate book about a food fight. There you go. I love that, because they fight each other. That's great. because I remember when my kids were young, they would love to throw food for some reason. And I'm like, that's
No.
not the purpose of food, people. That's not what we do. So yeah, I love it. So as you write and as you continue writing, how are you different as an author when you look back to like Joyful Eating, to the children's book and beyond? How are you growing as an author? What do you see different about yourself as you kind of work through each of the different books that you've been writing?
I think like now as an author, I'm far more accepting of the process. I think before, I've had a lot of learning along the way. Like writing a novel is like, okay, how do I even do that? I'd write stuff and then I'd read books and figure out structuring and stuff like that. So I've definitely learned a lot. But I think probably the biggest thing is acceptance and enjoying the process, because what you learn is that you don't control the outcome. You release your book into the world and you don't know what the response is going to be. You don't know how it's going to sell, those sorts of things, and potentially put pressure on myself to get stuff out within a certain time frame. Like the idea that we might have of like, I want to release my book by next Christmas or something, and then we put ourselves under a lot of pressure to do that. I think having some time frames can be useful, but it doesn't really matter if it's this Christmas or next Christmas. It's more, I'm just keep working towards something and focus more so on the process and enjoying the process and continuing to work on a project until it's complete, rather than sort of pushing it, if that makes sense, to the deadline. So I think probably just being a little bit more relaxed about writing. And I'm sort of treating writing as still exploring different ways of writing and expressing myself. And I think there's probably bringing a little bit more of myself into my work as well. I do express myself a lot through blogs and things like that, but I think there's bringing a lot of my personal history and maybe writing something a little bit more personal as well. Mm.
Do you think that blogging would be a good exercise for new authors to continue writing in a blog sense and then working on books? Do you think there's a benefit to?
I think so. I think it's a great way to keep a practice of writing, like keeping yourself into that practice, but also then that idea of like pressing publish. Even if it's like I'm writing a blog once a month or once in a blue moon, it's like pressing publish. And also like a blog forces you to polish your work, so that you feel comfortable for someone else to read it. So sometimes we can be working on a project and something like a memoir or something, and you can be working on that for 20 years and never feel 100% comfortable for anyone else to read this thing. Whereas if you write a short story, a little essay, and put it out into the world, and it's like 2,000 words, you're also feeling like I'm comfortable to share a part of myself. And so I think it helps a little bit with that confidence. Like definitely for me, like I think it depends on the person, but I think for me, pressing publish was a big part of my journey as well, to feel comfortable with sharing what I was writing and thinking. Even if I didn't really get much feedback from that, I think it was just, it's out there in the world, because writing a book is a huge thing, like it's out there in the world, and it's, it's in hard form and you can't edit it. Like the good thing about a blog is you can go back and edit it as well, or add to it or change it or whatever. So I think it can be quite a good activity, whether it's something like a blog or a newsletter or something where you're just getting out there and connecting with people, I think can be valuable. Mm.
Yeah, that's what I love too. Yeah, you're right. When you put a book out into the world, people have a copy of it on their table in their home. Unless you're going to go around and try to get every copy back if you want to change something, it's out there. It's out there. It has a life of its own. And you're right. You kind of lose a little bit of control over what happens after you push publish on a book. So yeah, that's big. That's big. What, as far as who else is inspiring you? You mentioned a few authors at the beginning, but who else is inspiring you as an author to kind of continue your journey, or helps you or challenges you to go, I never thought of it that way. I'm really interested in how that author writes, and I might pull a little bit of their style into what I do. Is there any other authors that really kind of stand out to you that make you stop and go, I like that?
I think for me, as a child, I was not much of a reader. I was a very slow reader and I had trouble reading. So for me, it's actually just diversifying my reading at the moment. It's like it's not necessarily being inspired by particular authors, but just exploring different styles of writing, and different genres and that sort of thing. For me, someone like Elizabeth Gilbert, her work has been really inspirational, and particularly her book, Big Magic, is really something I'd recommend for anyone working in creativity, because that book sort of helps decipher, the difference between I'm doing this for fun and for joy and for lightness. Am I doing this for publication? And the power of creativity and the process of creativity. So I found that a really useful book and a good reminder to come back to as well, to enjoy the process.
I always like to put resources in front of other authors as well, or things that inspire you could have an impact on the author that listening, could have an impact on their writing career as well. So that's another bonus of having you on the podcast is I like to pull that kind of information out of you to help others. So I'm glad to share that. I'll make sure I put a link for that book in the show notes as well, so people can go and check out that book. So as you look forward as an author into the future, you said you have other works in the process and things kind of in plan out for the future. What's exciting for you as an author? What are you working your way towards as you continue to write?
I think at the moment it's just working, like enjoying each project that comes about. So I'm not, again, like I said before, the lesson is almost like take the pressure off myself and it doesn't matter what year I have something out. So I think just playing with a few ideas. So I have a novel in the works, but I'm also looking into sort of more personal stories and a bit of my personal history. So for me, part of the reason I'm interested in the work that I do is, there was a lot of mental health issues and weight concerns in my family and my grandparents as well. So I think just exploring their stories and uncovering some, what was going on there and how I then internalized and created my own beliefs around that sort of what was happening in the family. So I think exploring that a little bit more as well. So that's what I mean by bringing myself into my work, because in my book, Joyful Eating, I share a little bit of my own story and why I do this work, but I think probably a little bit of my nervous, introverted energy, I sort of hold back on sharing things. And so I think just diving into a little bit more as to like, why am I so passionate about this work? Because it's like I'm passionate, like I love food and I love the idea, like I love playing with food. So like children's books sort of just comes really naturally, and it's almost like a playful thing that I'll talk to food while I'm cooking, it's like, hey, hey, what do you want to do today? And like sort of think of them as little characters that are playing things out and have personalities. But I think it's quite interesting to think, why am I so passionate about this work as well, and exploring that a little bit more, and some of my own beliefs and how they're formed, and then presenting them in new and interesting ways in the idea of like different fictional characters. So one of the things that I did in the first novel, The Weight of a Woman, I sort of really was intentional in the characters that they sort of represented different ways that people engage with dieting. So whether they're, forceful, push, or whether they're, feel like a failure all the time, or, whether it's optimal health and green smoothie. And so it's almost like thinking, I sort of thought of the characters as like diet personalities. And so I think it's just bringing a little bit of that in there as well, and sort of looking at some of my beliefs and what would they be like if they were a character, and explore them in that sort of fictional way as well.
Okay. So, Tansy, there's people listening to the episode and maybe they are struggling with their weight. They're struggling with body self-image. They're really, really struggling right now. And they've come to this episode because of maybe the title of the episode, because of you and the books that you write. And they would love to hear your thoughts directed to them directly. What would you say to somebody listening who is wrestling with all of these different elements in their life and their opinion of themselves, to encourage them that through reading your books or doing the research like you've been doing, how can we live a healthy life with a healthy self-image, understanding who we are? What kind of words of wisdom would you say to the person listening right now that would encourage them today?
I think the first thing is that all bodies, no matter their size or health conditions, is worthy of nourishment and love and self-care. And I think we approach dieting as a way to fight our bodies. And so it's a resistance to the bodies we're in. And so we start our journey with from a place of hatred or punishment or deprivation rather than care and nurturing. And so the energy we bring to dieting is very detrimental to our health and our psychological health as well. So I very much believe in starting from a place of acceptance and then curiosity, like how does my body respond to the food that I provided, to the movement? Why do I do the things that I do? So it's more of coming from a curious place rather than I need to find the perfect diet, or I need to change my body, or I need to lose this weight in order to be healthy, which is very much focusing on external stuff that we don't even really know if it's true or how our body's going to respond. So first it's acceptance, and then it's the curiosity as well. And I think we can only really heal our bodies from a place of love, not fighting or resisting.
I like that. That's great, Tansy. As I have one more question for you here at the end before we close off. Really appreciate you making time to do this and be a part of the podcast. But before I ask my last question, Tansy, as far as connecting with you, where we can find your books and where we can support you as listeners and readers, or if we're an author and we have a question for you that we'd love to reach out and speak to you through email or whatever, how is the best way for us to find your books?
So everything's pretty fun on my website, which is joyfuleatingnutrition.com. And there's links to Instagram and Facebook and the books as well. And you can email me directly from the website as well. So it's probably the best place to go to find everything that I'm up to.
Good. Okay, so to close off, I want to leave on a high note because, we've definitely talked about some stuff that people might be listening and really struggling with. I want to know where you are right now, Tansy, in your journey as you've been writing and all these things. Where are you at in your life right now? How are things better? How are things improving for you? And what's exciting for you coming down the road personally, whether that's writing related or not? What's exciting for you in 2024? What are you looking forward to this year?
It's looking forward to playing with creativity a little bit more. So I recipe write as well as write books, and I think just playing with some of those things. And I love collaborating as well, so with photographers and illustrators. So I've got work coming up with photographers and illustrators this year. So I really enjoy that, and that's part of the reason that I like self-publishing, because I do like collaborating. I think just trying different creative projects, going a little bit outside of the box.
What I love about our conversation now is I have permission to have a food fight. When I was a child, I was told to never play with my food. Now you've told me that I can, so I'm happy to know that. I've learned all these great things today by having you on. So my wife is going to be shaking her head going, oh,
yes, no. Definitely.
But yes, I have permission to have a food fight. So I love it. Tansy, it's so great to have you on the podcast. Keep me in mind as new books come out and new projects happen.
Awesome.
We'd love to have you come back, give us an update on your writing career, and rejoice with you as new books come out and celebrate with you as well. So keep us in mind here. We'd love to have you come back. But thank you so
No
much
worries.
for
Thank
being
you very
part
much
of
for the
the podcast.
opportunity.
It's great to have you here.
Right.
Okay, everyone, all the information's in the show notes. Go there, support another great author on her journey. And what I love, again, about Tansy being on here is just about you as a listener, as a reader, you have somebody in your corner that understands and believes in you as well, that you can live a really healthy and robust life and not worry about some of the things that people put pressure on you. You don't need to worry about that. And Tansy's got the books for you to help you on your journey. So again, Tansy, thank you so much for being here. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Hey, well, thank you for listening. It's a new year, and we're excited to be releasing even more great episodes of Living the Next Chapter. And we want you to come along for the journey. Thank you for being here. If you know of an author that you would love to have featured on the podcast, an author that you enjoy, an author that brings you that excitement, that you would just love to hear them interviewed on this podcast, I would love to hear your suggestion for a future guest. And what would be a question or two that you would want us to ask them on your behalf? Go to livinginthenextchapter.com. There's a little speak pipe icon there. You can leave me a voice message. Tell me who should be on the show and give me some question ideas. And I'll use your request and reach out to that author and invite them on and give you full credit for the idea. livingthenextchapter.com. Would love to hear your suggestion. And thank you for listening. Catch you on the next episode.
Hey there, fellow parent. If you're anything like me, balancing screen time for our kids is a constant struggle. That's why I want to share a little secret with you, KidsPod. It's this amazing app I found that's packed with podcasts just for kids. Imagine stories, learning, and fun, all without the screen. It's been a game changer in our house, keeping my kids engaged and their imaginations running wild. And guess what? It's completely free. So download KidsPod today. Trust me, it's a decision you won't regret.